FilmStruggles is an experience-based podcast where we ask all the questions an early filmmaker would make.
With a new guest every week, from experts to people that are starting just like us.
We cover different topics like motivation, work balance, networking, and so much more.
We discuss what to do, what not to do, and how to turn struggles into action.
I am Claudia.
And I am Gabriel. Welcome to FilmStruggles.
Tired, lost, exhausted, and discouraged. Have you ever felt this way about your career or life? Don't worry. All those feelings are way more common than you think. On this week's episode of FilmStruggles, we're going to be talking about anxiety, motivation, and what it takes to flip the switch.
Our special guest for the week is Nicholas Humphries, an award-winning director of more than 70 short films, features, and digital series with international distribution on DVD, Blu-ray, broadcast, and video on demand. His feature credits include Death Do Us Part, Mermaid Song, and the sci-fi thriller project Ithaca. Nick is also the senior instructor for directing at Vancouver Film School, and we sat down to talk about motivation and his journey as a working director.
During the quarantine, I was feeling kind of like a little bit down. I didn't even know what I wanted to do anymore. And I remember that when I was 15, I did at school this vision board that teachers made you to do, like, how do you see yourself in 1 year? How do you see yourself in 5 and then 15? Like, it was kind of, I think, 1 or 2 years ago that I took it out. And I realized that a lot of the things that I put there, I actually did it. But it had an expiration date that it was 15 years. That is right now. And I tried to do that same exercise. How do I see myself now in 1 year, in 5, or in 15? And I couldn't answer it. It's very easy to lose the motivation in those moments. So I don't know, how was that for you when you started? Do you have like this sort of plan, or how do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, I think so. I can only imagine how difficult it would be for you guys who have just like graduated film school and then get hit with this pandemic, because there's two different things happening here. I think, with the pandemic, we're dealing with the grief of the end of the world that we knew, right? And so when we have a status quo, we can easily go like, oh, that's the thing, that I can visualize in the future. Mm-hmm. Right now, we don't know where we're going to land, right? We don't know what the world's going to be like a year from now. Hopefully we get some semblance of normalcy, but it's inevitably going to be different, right? So I think, first of all, we have to forgive ourselves if we kind of feel like we're just floating for a while until the world settles. I think that's okay. I think we need to be kind to ourselves during that. That said, you're also feeling something I think is very normal in this career, where you set these goals for yourself, and then you reach these goals, and then you kind of have these moments of, well, what now?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's how it was for me, because I never thought that I would be able to make a short film. I never thought I'd be able to make a feature film. And I never thought I'd be able to get paid to direct a feature film. And so when I made my first short film, I had to kind of go like, well, what can I do next? Maybe I can make a feature film before I die, right? Like that was literally the thing I thought. And then like within a couple of years, I did my master's. I shot this web series, which helped me get the legitimacy I needed as a director to get a feature film, because it was a longer story. Shot that film, released that film, and then went through the same thing again, where I was just like, oh God, like I had set this goal, it's done. How old was I at the time? I think I was like 31 when I finished that movie. And I was like, I guess I'll try and make a better movie, or maybe I'll try and so but every single time, there's two things that happens. Like every single time you reach a goal, you have to kind of reevaluate, and you go through that feeling. And I think everybody goes through that. Mm-hmm. Also in film, it's not as progressive as if you think it's going to be. Like you think, oh, I got this movie, which means that all these other opportunities are going to open up for me. For me, I have started, it feels like in the exact same place that I began after each project.
Okay.
And there's this huge gap in between that I refer to as the dark times, and I'm trying to take that away from my my vocabulary, because I think it's damaging to think about the time in between as a dark time. But you have to find a way to kind of, accept that there's going to be a break and that other things are going to come. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You kind of develop things and you work on things, or you just kind of enjoy the time in between projects. But other things do end up coming as long as you keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
And I remember earlier in my career, it was so terrifying to not know where the next project was coming from, because I had exhausted that opportunity. That opportunity was over. I don't know where the next was coming from. And then the phone would ring, and then someone would call, and then like something would trickle into another movie, and then it happened again, which really allowed me during the pandemic to just, yes, I was going through the grieving that everyone else was going through about, the death of the old world.
Yeah.
But as far as like where the next project's coming from, I feel like it'll come, and if I really want to do something about it, I can sit down and write a script. I think the vision board is brilliant. I have an assignment that I make my students do in the final term where, and it's super cheesy, but like I make them do a 5-year plan, right? And just take 5 minutes and think about like, what are all the things, and it doesn't even have to be 5 years, like what are all the things that you would like in your life? Just brainstorm, right? It's like, well, okay, one day, I want to write a book about directing, and on top of like, I want to make a haunted house movie. I want to make a Halloween movie. I want to make a Christmas horror movie. Like these are all just like things that I have. And once you've gotten it out on paper, it's a lot easier to kind of refine your thoughts and go like, okay, well, I can wake up every morning and do one thing that gets me a step closer to one of these things.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's again, it's like this lack of actual control that we have over when things happen for us can be really debilitating. And I think a lot of people give up because that feeling is too much.
Yeah.
And I think it's just really important to find some sense of control in your life. I think that'll motivate you to keep moving forward. And sometimes it's not even a film thing. For me, it's going to the gym, right?
Yeah.
Or I like cooking, right? So that's a creative outlet that I get to have. Whatever it is that you get to do, I think it's also really like important to have a life outside of film for just a healthy, life work balance, because it can consume your life, right? Like, and to a degree, it has to be if you're going to get there faster than everybody else.
Yeah.
You kind of have to let film consume you. But I think it's really important to, like have that balance, have something else unrelated or people in your life that have nothing to do with the film industry, right? That you have real relationships with, because again, there's going to be big periods where nothing's happening, or periods after you shoot a big movie and it's a great opportunity and it takes 10 years off your life and you're exhausted. Where do you go for relief after that experience, right? You don't want people that are your ride or dies, or that hobby that you really love to do that brings you joy. I think all that stuff's really important.
I don't know. I wanted to cover two things, but let's calm down, guys.
Yeah, I'm making so many notes.
Yeah. No, because I really like what you said about creating a sense of control in a completely controlless industry. Not controlless, because of course everything is controlled on a set and all that, that we all know. But you don't know what the future holds. I think right after film school, I kind of jumped into this reckless motivation, like black hole, where I was just trying to get things. Not as much as a director, because what you said, like I needed my life outside of film to get inspiration to then bring it back to film. But as either a writer or a producer or art director or whatever, I was just like, okay, do you need an art director? Because I can do this, I can do that. I know how to do this. What do you need that? Because I know how to do it. And then it got me into a place where I was getting those opportunities, but at the same time, I was not happy because I was not healthy and I was not eating properly or not taking care of myself, or even my house. My house was a mess because I had no time to clean it. Yeah, do you feel like this black hole of reckless motivation where you just have to keep going?
Yeah, like I'm at an interesting kind of crossroads right now, because I think, for the first 5 years after I made the decision, I want to be a filmmaker, like I want to be a director, I did nothing else but live, breathe, eat, film, right? And sometimes I was gearing up towards bigger projects. Sometimes I was like, okay, what are we going to shoot this weekend, right? Because I wanted to make as many mistakes as I could so that when an opportunity came my way, I had made all the rookie mistakes already. And I think that's a young person's gig, like doing that all the time, right? And I had this moment where, so my last feature I shot 2 years ago, and we shot in Sudbury, Ontario. And it had a budget of it was the biggest movie I had done. It was a couple $1 million budget. It was this big space sci-fi horror film. And I had this moment where I was laying in bed after a 12-hour day, and I had to get up the next morning at 4 a.m. to get to set. And I was just racked with anxiety and wasn't eating well and hadn't exercised in a month. And I realized, I was like, I worked so hard to have the opportunity to work harder than I've ever worked in my entire life. Right. And there was a moment, I'll fully admit, there was a moment I was laying there and I was like, I'm never doing this again. Of course, that feeling passed, especially once you're done, and that feeling of accomplishment. And then it gets I got to go to a theater in Los Angeles, just a regular theater. It wasn't even a film festival, and go see the movie that I directed with a bunch of randos in a theater in LA. And that feeling was like, okay, I want to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized the importance of when I'm in between projects, rather than letting the stress of not knowing where the next one is coming from consume me, those are the periods where I have to take care of myself. Those are the periods where I get to have a clean house. I get to go to the gym. I get to eat as healthy as possible, because once that thing comes, I'm looking at potentially 3 months of my life where all of that's going to go down the toilet.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to get myself ready for those situations physically, especially I'm going to be 40. I feel like I'm 60 sometimes, but I'm getting up there, and I don't have the energy that I used to.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 25, I could stay up all night and get up and do it all over again the next day. Now, if I go at a night of drinking, I need 2 weeks to recover out with friends.
Yeah.
So you gotta take care of yourself in the in-between, which means shifting your focus a little bit. Still have irons in the fire, still have, do one thing every day that gets you a little bit closer to those projects and those opportunities, but prioritize taking care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
It's going to allow you to do your best work once you get to those things.
I really like what you're saying right now. And with the 5-year plan, let's just this is the things that I want to do, but let's do one step that is going to get me closer to that.
Yeah. And I think as you I think when I say, do one thing,
mm-hmm.
you can do multiple things in a day, but make sure that when you're working on something, nothing else matters. You're focusing on that one thing.
Yeah.
I met a woman in Los Angeles, and I can't remember, she was doing this, she had read a book and she was modeling this after a book, but she basically had, because she worked from home, she would set a timer for herself, and she would block out hours of her day to focus on one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm.
When she was doing that, nothing else existed. She was just focused on that script. She was just working on that social media outreach. She was just sending emails.
Yeah.
But creating those times that are allotted to just focus on one thing, I think, are also really important, because when there's a million things that you could be doing, it becomes overwhelming, and then you don't do any of them well.
Mm-hmm.
So finding a system where you can give yourself that focus, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and I also like what you said, that you need to take care of yourself, because you don't know when that opportunity that you are looking for, it's gonna come. So you might as well be healthy and be on your best shape. And I think that's the thing that right now it's happening, because I felt that I was kind of rushing the whole time. I don't know, if I had a deadline, that it was only in my mind. I don't know anyone was pressuring me but me. And I remember that even in film school, what helped me a lot was to meditate.
I think another useful exercise is I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I listen to a lot of podcasts that involve hosts that go to therapy. I'm too cheap to pay for myself, so I get a lot of these tools from podcasts that I listen to. But there's one that I listened to who, this woman was talking about this inner voice, right? These things that we tell, this pressure that we put on ourselves, can really start to hurt us. And a useful tool is to, when we find ourselves saying something to ourselves that is negative or somewhat damaging, we need to imagine our 5-year-old self, right, standing in front of us. Right. And then imagine ourselves saying those things that we say to ourselves every day to that 5-year-old kid.
Yeah.
You would never do that. Right. You'd be kind and supportive and all those things. And so checking yourself when you start to put that kind of pressure on yourself, visualizing, your younger you, and then you know, because maybe there's something useful in what you're saying. You're just structuring it in a way in your head that is hurtful
Yeah.
and damaging. So rewiring it to something that is constructive for that child version can be, you know, a better way of treating ourselves. We have to be kind to ourselves.
Wow, that's very powerful. I don't know. I really wanted to hear from you, like if you ever experienced anything like the imposter syndrome.
Oh yeah. Oh.
Yeah, it's a very close friend of mine, this syndrome.
So I'm going to tell you something. And I've heard this a million times, and it makes me feel a little bit better, but it never like fixes it for me. But like, you know, every brilliant artist that we can think of has that feeling that we don't know what we're doing, and eventually everybody's going to find out, right? That gives me a little bit of peace. It doesn't make the feeling go away. But, you know, hearing those stories about like, I was watching a YouTube video the other day where they were talking about Toni Morrison, right? Like one of the greatest writers of our time feels that way, right? And so I was like, okay, you know, maybe that means I'm, you know, I'm doing okay. Because I've said this to you guys before, but I think it's this hard balance that we have to find when we're creative people, because we have to be critical of what we're doing, because that's what helps us to grow. We have to be able to look back at our projects like, oh, I could have done this better, this better, this better, and then you get better, right? If we thought everything we're doing is brilliant, then we're never going to get better than we are in that moment, right? Which is also damaging. So it's finding a balance between holding on to that while not letting that inner critic become like a saboteur and stop us from creating things. But like 100%, I've got that feeling every single day. And I have like the other struggle that I have, and I both hope and well, no, I hope you guys have this as well, is that, you know, one day when you're making bigger projects and it's available to bigger audiences, a lot of people are going to have opinions about what you're putting out in the world, right?
Yeah.
And if you know how to use Google, you can find every single comment, right? Which is very damaging. And I don't encourage that. But funny because, you know, like I'll often read a bad comment on the internet and I just want to laugh because I was like, oh, you think that's hurtful? You should hear the things I say to myself.
Exactly. Like, I know that already.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a constant struggle. But I think the only thing that's gotten me close to feeling okay with that feeling is to know that like all the people that we respect feel that as well, right? And it means that we're an artist. It means that we are someone who's going to get better with every project because we can see the things that, you know, we're not doing well. I think where it becomes damaging is when we get into those times where nothing's happening and we start telling ourselves we're just not good enough to get the next thing, right? We got to fight through that. So, because there's, I think it's, oh God, NPR. Keep wanting to say Ira Glass has this thing called the creativity gap that he talks about. And the idea, I'm going to butcher it. There's a TED talk on this you can listen to, I'm sure. But the idea behind it is that, like, you know, as artists, we come to film or writing or painting, whatever it is, because we love it, right? And we know what's good, right? Because we consume it, we know what has value. And when we're first getting started, our experience level, the resources that we have available to us, all those things only really support us making stuff down here when the stuff that we love is up here. And it takes time to bridge that gap. And the only way to get through it is to fight your way through it, right? You have to like put out a high volume of work and get closer and closer, you know, the longer you go. And maybe you're chasing that level your whole life. But yeah, it's the only way, because most people just don't survive the gap, right? And I think as soon as you go, well, whatever, this is too hard. Yeah, it's over. I mean, if you have a plan B, I always say in film, it's like, if you have a plan B and you'd be happy doing that plan B, probably do the plan B. I don't know how to do anything else. Yeah. So I've been pursuing this for most of my adult life. So at this point, I have no choice. I have to keep chasing the dream of making something that I think has value. Yeah. And that's my fate now. And am going to do my very best to just find some joy in that,
Mm-hmm,
right? And
mm-hmm.
find some zen in the in-between times. And, you know, when I'm being too hard on myself, try and rewire my brain to talk about myself like I'm a 5-year-old.
That's a very good technique. I was actually talking to Gabe about this specific that you are talking about right now, that I feel there is like these extremes where like you are pursuing this goal that you have and then you are in this creativity gap. But how do you manage, I don't know, like from going from like giving up, or you are being super stubborn and then you are like, no, I need to do it this way, and it has to work, and then you continue, but you're just like hitting a wall. And then I think in the middle there is this adjustment, but sometimes I like, what I feel is that I don't know where I am. Like, am I giving up too soon? Am I being super stubborn? Like, how do I measure that? I don't know.
I think, you know, rather than thinking of it as a plan B and changing your trajectory, I think it's okay for us to pivot. And I think we can pivot multiple times in our careers, right? Where it's
Mhm.
like, you know, I, for example, have been chasing this idea of I want to shoot bigger and bigger feature films. And something that I've realized is the bigger the productions that I've worked on, the less joy I find in those productions, right? Which, and I've wound up in a similar place we were talking about earlier, where it's just like, well, what do I do? There's this thing that I thought I wanted that I'm not sure if I really want that anymore.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to come to the realization that maybe what I want is not to do bigger and bigger movies where there's more cooks in the kitchen and there's more money on the table. So like 10 different people have their say in the final product after you get your hands on it. Maybe smaller, even though we're kind of conditioned to think that like smaller is bad, smaller is going backwards.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it's better to now go backward, take a step back with the experience that I now have, and do the size of the things I was doing before, but with the experience I gained, right? And so it's like, it's a pivot into something that I think, you know, has the same potential to like make money and stuff like that. I mean, making a bunch of money was never part of it, right? But you know, I can still make a feature film for a low budget and get distribution and sell it, make a bit of cash. That's still a possibility.
Yeah.
But if it's gonna bring me joy, and I'm gonna like the time I spend on this earth making those kinds of projects, then I need to allow myself to pivot in that direction if that's what my heart is telling me to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think just to get back to what you were saying about like hitting a wall, I think if you're doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same result, that can be an indication that like you need to try something
Different. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's okay to be really creative with what that thing is, right? Just because nobody's done it that way before doesn't mean you can't be a success at it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we're all unique individuals. Like you have experiences that outside of film that influence, you know, your viewpoint as an artist. Maybe there's a way of combining those two things, and because you'd be attacking it with a sense of authenticity of, you know, from yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how people end up being successful, right?
Yeah.
When we tell stories that mean something to us, then we end up connecting with an audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we try and make things for everybody, right, the general way, those are the things that fall flat.
Yeah.
So yeah, pivoting is good, I think, and celebrating, you know, discovering a place to pivot rather than beating yourself up for changing directions a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, makes total sense. Because sometimes I feel that we, like you said, like we're very hard on ourselves, and you think that's the way it should be, and it's okay to change, and it's okay just to find that pivot, and then just go from there, and then just adapt and adjust as we go. Yeah. Because nobody thought that we would be stuck in our homes right now, for example.
There was, you know what, actually it was whose film was it? We had a student film. It was a final project that had a line of dialogue in it that just floored me, and it was something to the effect of the future is promised to no one. I just kind of like let that line wash over me. I was just like, wow, like we can't control what happens. We can't control that there's even going to be a tomorrow.
Yeah.
I actually just, this is kind of a downer, I'm sorry, but it's topical. Yesterday, I woke up and found out that a childhood friend of mine had passed away from cancer. And she was a year younger than me. And, you know, I take for granted that it's like, well, there's like this huge expanse of time. And it's like, I spent so much time in my 20s and my 30s really like focused on goals and then going like, wow, I made that movie, but 3 to 5 years of my life is gone. Like, did I really enjoy the moment, right? Did I sit there and meditate and just kind of like look at my surroundings and appreciate my apartment and my boyfriend and the job I have and the people that are around me? Because I think, you know, we can get sucked up in these goals and looking towards the future and not appreciate what's happening here right now. And that can go away in a second, right?
Yeah.
None of us know what's going to happen. So I think that I'm interested now that I've had that kind of, you know, reminder to stop and smell the flowers, for lack of a better idiom. I'm interested to see what that does to my motivation and my joy and appreciation, because I think it's easier to lose sight of that. You know, today is what really matters, right? We're making memories every breath we take, so appreciate it as it's happening.
Every time that we as a general entity, we talk about motivation, it can easily go down to, oh, I don't feel motivated, or like, how can I adjust things? But I'm really curious to know if you had a moment where you stopped and like, oh, I really did that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that happens. I've been very lucky in my career in that I've had opportunities that have come before, like other people that started directing at the same time as me, who I consider to be stronger directors, haven't had the same opportunities because of, I don't know, the stars like aligning in a certain way, right? And I do consider myself very lucky, and I'm grateful for the luck that I've had. But every single one of those opportunities have led to an intense amount of work. And I find that every time, the moment that it's not even like seeing a film in the theater for me is a nerve-wracking experience. I can barely breathe or swallow. So it's not that. The moments where I think I'm able to kind of just like everything goes away and I'm able to appreciate what's happening it's almost always that first day on set when you're standing behind the monitor and you're just about to call action for the first time, and you see the way that the cinematography and the costumes and the makeup and the actors have all come together to form a single frame based on things that you've told people. Because at that point, the movie is perfect. The movie has infinite potential, right? And I don't think it ever gets better than that. I mean, it does, but it's like you shoot the movie, you get more stuff, it's great. You get into post, you want to kill yourself because you're like, oh, I messed it up, especially when you're watching the rough cut. Little by little, you get it back to where you want it to be. But it's like the rest of it is a struggle, right? And then, you know, you're watching the final project, you're, again, having to be our own worst critics. There's always stuff that you would change, right? But like, yeah, that moment when you see that first frame, it's like, I think that is a moment like we're here. Like I made it to this moment,
like,
right?
I arrive. Yeah.
Everything led to this.
Yeah. But also just to get part to like an earlier part of your question, you were talking about motivation again. And I wanted to mention the power of, you know, especially during something like a pandemic or when we work from home. Something that I've found is really, really important is to keep a schedule. Right? Like, even if you don't have anywhere to be, like tomorrow morning, I don't have to be anywhere till noon tomorrow. I'm still going to get up at 7 a.m. I'm going to walk my dog. My dog has really helped me with this. I'm going to feed him. I'm going to make myself coffee. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to answer a couple of emails. And like, just the fact of like the act of starting your day with a bit of a routine like that really sets a tone for the rest of your day.
Yeah.
Which I think can, you know, keep you kind of motivated. The worst days I find are the ones where I decide to give myself a break and sleep in until noon and not do anything. Those are the days that I feel the grossest at the end.
Mm-hmm.
That I've accomplished anything. So I think that too, like keeping a routine for yourself, even if you're the only one that you're accountable to, is also really important. Yeah. I always give like two generic pieces of advice to, I mean, I try and give specific advice to students when they're graduating based on, who they are and where they're going to land. But the thing that I always tell everybody is, at the very least, if you don't know what else to do, there's two things that you can start working on, right? And assuming that came to film school because you want to be a feature film director, is start developing two scripts. I probably said this to both of you at some point, but start developing two scripts. Do the like money is no object version of that script where, that when luck hits and a producer is like, you're brilliant, let me give you a bunch of money.
Yeah.
You have that script ready to go because that script's going to take time to get it ready to show someone. Start working on that now. But again, because of the control thing and the nebulousness of when is that ever going to get made, that you can lose your momentum with a project like that. So it's also really important to be developing a second script where you take stock of your resources. And even if your resources include a cell phone, right? That's the only thing you have to shoot on. Well, what is a story that has to be told on a cell phone, right? Start writing that script as well, because once you're done that script, you can shoot that script, right? You can get your friends together, you can grab a couple actors, and you can bang out that script, right? Yeah. And having that sense of like, I'm working on something that's going to get made can really just fuel your momentum. And that's generic advice. And that's advice that I've been telling other people a lot lately because I'm trying to encourage myself
to do it.
You're trying to follow your own advice.
Yeah, do as I say, not as I do. This is what my dad used to tell me. I think, and especially, as directors, I've always been the kind of director where the opportunities that I've had have been because a script has been greenlit, right? The script is connected to the producer in some way, and then they were looking for a director and they hired me. And I'm grateful for those opportunities, don't get me wrong. But I've noticed that the films that I end up loving the most are ones that have, a kind of singular vision behind it, or is a passion project for somebody. And that isn't to say that film is collaborative, right? We're going into this thing and we're getting all the best ideas from our key creatives. That still remains the same. But I think it's important as directors to be like developing our own projects that we care about.
Yeah.
Because I think that's how we're going to be able to make something, even if it's small, even if it's shot on a cell phone, if we're being honest in our storytelling or being vulnerable, it's going to connect with an audience, and that's how we make things that are noteworthy and remarkable. So I think that's important too.
Before we go, Nick, we wanted to ask you, since our podcast is called FilmStruggles, what is your biggest struggle right now?
Biggest struggle right now? Well, I was talking earlier about kind of refining my footing because my goals have changed. And I'm actually right in the middle of that right now, where I'm realizing that I don't want to go bigger. I want to go smaller. And I've now had that realization. I know I still want to shoot features, and I want to shoot them small, and I want to have, a certain level of control over it. But I'm stuck in that moment right before getting started, right? So it's like I've made a decision, but I haven't sat down to write a script, right? And I've been hovering in that place since probably the beginning of the pandemic. And I have no excuse. I was in a cabin in the woods for 3 months, like baking and smoking pot. And I did not write anything. And so, I think that's my biggest struggle right now, is just taking the first step. If you had asked me what my biggest struggle was 3 months ago, it would be like, I don't know what I want to do anymore, right?
Yeah.
Which was a scarier problem to have. So having the realization is great. I feel a lot better about it now. Now it's just about like finding the motivation and the sense of quiet. And I feel like the longer this pandemic goes on, my biggest fear actually right now is when everything changes again after the pandemic. Right? Like things are heating up at work, the schedule is changing, and I've just gotten used to what this is. Like I know how to operate in this world, and now you're going to change it again on me into something. It's like, that's kind of making
having to readapt again, once again.
Yeah, because it's not going to be the same, right? And like I'm thinking about going back to work, and like, it's not going to be 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, which is great for me. I can stay at home. I will have more time to focus on scripts. I can hang out with my dog, like all things that make me happy. But those times that I do go to work, I'll be wearing like a face shield and like not touching anything and not be able to sit across from somebody and have a connection with a student, you know, the way we got to when you guys were in school. It's going to be happening through a computer. So this sort of, I don't know. It's a my biggest struggle right now is just a mass of like not really knowing what's coming next and trying to find the motivation to take the first step anyways.
Okay. Nick, thank you so much. Thank you so much. We have really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. This is great.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to give us a review and share this with someone you think might need it.
Also, share with us your favorite quote.
You can find more information about the podcast and our guests on the website FilmStruggles.com.
Remember to follow us at FilmStruggles on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Thank you for listening.
See you next week with a new guest
and a brand new struggle.
FilmStruggles is hosted, produced, and edited by Claudia Hernandez Barragan and Gabriel Sousa Nunes.
Executive producer is Gerson Carranza and sound design by Sebastian Sagastumi.